Hey everybody, Joseph here, bringing you another broker update, which I am just sending out in order to give you updates on things that I'm seeing in transactions and contracts and issues that we may be seeing, particularly with forms and just things that are coming up that would be important and timely. So this time we're going to talk a little bit about some small changes that happened on the forms here over the last couple of weeks. Actually, the changes were made back in May, but they didn't really get updated until the third into the third party systems into the last couple of weeks. So I wanted to point out two of them that are pretty relevant that I want to make sure that are easy to miss. I want to make sure you cover when you're going through the contracts. So as always, I'm going to turn to the contract itself to talk about what changes are and any answers that we need. And the first one we're going to look at is we're going to look at the Form 220 exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So two changes that were made in here to talk about. The first one is in regards to the negotiation of buyer broker compensation. So when this change was made earlier this year, basically it was that there is no longer an option in a listing agreement for the selling broker, listing broker to pay the buyer broker directly. And in this section here, it said the listing broker or the seller would negotiate that directly with the buyer's broker. It was not meant as literally as it was taken. However, in order to clarify, they basically just added this here that the owner may, through the listing broker, negotiate specific transaction costs with the buyer via the buyer's agent, right? So that is just to basically say, hey, yes, that this is negotiable between the seller and the buyer's broker as far as what your compensation will be on Form 120. However, that is not actually a conversation that the seller and the buyer's broker have. It is a conversation that is had through the brokers themselves. So quick clarification on there. The second one is one that has actually come up a couple of times in some of our transactions. And this is a good conversation piece to have with your seller prospects. And this is in section 13, paragraph M. And what they've done here is they've added this specific here to say that the seller will not deal directly with prospective buyers of the property during the period of the agreement, and they shall refer any and all inquiries received offers directly and immediately to the broker. I would encourage you to definitely talk about this one with your sellers. Right now, we're seeing a rise in very aggressive, nothing wrong with it, but very aggressive investors that are out there. They're doing direct seller marketing. They're not agents. They're not doing anything wrong. It's a business model that is perfectly fine. But what's happening is that conversation's then happening directly between the seller and the buyer. And what this does is this asks the seller and actually just tells the seller that per this agreement, they need to refer that to you. So those are the changes that came in the listing agreement. The next one I want to talk about are some changes that we are seeing in the contract itself, and that is in Form 310. And this is these are some small ones, but also pretty important ones here. So the first one we're going to talk about as we jump to 310 here is that in section 27, we actually have added more room and specific room for buyer notice, right? And this is going to be notice and delivery as it relates to where the buyer wants all their contracts and everything sent. And then more importantly, notice an email mailing address where the sellers want all contracts, correspondence, and specifically termination fee to be sent. This is very, very important. Whether you're the buyer's agent or whether you are the listing agent, this is upon you to make sure that section is filled out at ratification. I have seen more times in the last 6 weeks than I have seen probably in the last year combined, where we are losing basically contracts are not being properly terminated because we do not know where to deliver the termination fee. Now, as I've said from the beginning, the termination fee, if you do not have this information filled out, you hand deliver it directly to the listing agent's office. But if this is on a holiday or if you have your due diligence terminating on the weekend and that office isn't open, that could be a problem. So section 27 just gives you more of an area for you to fill this out, and it's very prominent so everyone knows where this is. This is not something, we're not trying to game the system and say, oh, if we don't know where to deliver, they don't know where to deliver it, they get it as is. No buyers moving forward on that. The second change on here is actually just kind of a formatting change, and this has moved all the all the broker information to a 10th page. I think part of this was we were getting jealous because most contracts in other states were not as or much longer than ours. So they wanted a 10th page here. So what we did is added a 10th page, basically has all the broker disclosure information on here. And this is the information on the buyer's firm as well as the seller's firm. Now, this does not make a contract valid or voidable if it is or is not filled out. However, for informational purposes and for transparency on communication, highly recommend that you get this filled out so everyone knows who they're communicating with, when they're communicating with them, and how they're communicating. So, as always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, have a great day, happy selling, and let me know if you need anything. Take care.